You know, when you think about America today, richest, most powerful country in history, right? But what if I told you that its rise to the top was, well, basically a historical accident? Seriously, for more than 100 years, this whole continent was seen as a worthless backwater. So let's dig into the incredible, completely unexpected story of how that all changed.
So how in the world did a bunch of ignored colonies turn into a global superpower? That's the big question we're going to tackle here. And the answer, let me tell you, is a wild ride of pure ambition, some seriously lucky breaks, and of course, a whole lot of conflict.
And this is the part that's kind of wild to think about. For over 100 years after Columbus and the others showed up, North America was, well, it was ignored. It was literally the place you just sailed past to get to the real prize.
Okay, so to really get this, we gotta rewind all the way to the beginning. For that first 100 years or so of exploration, North America was a total letdown. See, these European explorers, they weren't looking for some new continent. Nope, they were looking for a fast pass, a shortcut to the unbelievable riches of Asia.
You have to put yourself in their shoes. The Spanish and Portuguese, they hit the absolute jackpot down in Central and South America. We're talking empires dripping with gold and silver. And then you have North America, which compared to that just seemed empty, unprofitable. For decades, it was just written off as useless lands. Can you believe it?
But of course, things changed. Eventually, other big players, I'm talking Britain and France, started to show up. And suddenly it was a mad dash, a huge scramble to claim this continent that everybody had ignored for so long. And that, right there, set the stage for a massive, world-changing fight.
So by 1754, things are getting tense. A big conflict is on the horizon. But here's the thing, it was a total mismatch. You had New France, which was really just a few people scattered around mostly for trade, and then you had the British colonies, booming with over 1 million settlers. I mean, that huge difference tells you everything you need to know about who was really all in on building something new here.
Okay, so with a population advantage of almost 20-1, yeah, who do you think won that fight?
Right. It wasn't even close. The British won, and it was a total game changer. France had to give up Canada and all their land east of the Mississippi. Just like that, in one fell swoop, Britain was the top dog in North America. Period. But winning a war like that, it costs a ton of money. So to pay off those massive debts, Britain looked at its American colonies and thought, aha, taxes. Well, that move sparked absolute outrage. You get protests and that famous line we all know. No taxation without representation. And that was the spark that lit the fuse for a revolution.
What came next was just a whirlwind. I mean, a truly chaotic and super critical decade. The colonies declare independence in 76. They actually win the war by 83. But then what? Their first shot at a government was a complete disaster. The whole country was literally on the verge of falling apart. So they had to go back to the drawing board, hammering out the Constitution. And finally, by 1789, they had a stable government up and running, with George Washington as the first president.
Okay, so now they've got a stable government. What's next? Well, the new nation turned its eyes to the West. In this next chapter, it's all about explosive, almost unbelievable expansion that's going to take this country from one ocean all the way to the other. And the first huge jump forward was just pure geopolitical luck. You got Napoleon over in Europe, who's desperate for cash to pay for his wars. So what does he do? He offers to sell not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana territory. For $15 million, the United States instantly doubled in size. I mean, talk about the greatest real estate deal in history, right? But all this expansion came with a big, ugly, recurring problem, a toxic one. When the independent Republic of Texas wanted to join the U.S., one single question brought everything to a screeching halt. Would it be a slave state? Every single new piece of land threatened to mess up the super fragile balance of power, just digging that deep, divisive wound even deeper. And the pace was just relentless. Boom, Florida from Spain. Boom, Texas finally gets annexed. Boom, a deal with Britain for the Pacific Northwest. Then a war with Mexico adds the entire Southwest. Think about it. In just a little over 50 years, the country's so-called manifest destiny was a reality. It stretched from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. But all this incredible growth, it was like putting fresh paint on a house with a cracked foundation. The country was getting bigger, for sure, but it was also growing apart, and that was leading to what would become its greatest test ever. You really had two different countries living under one flag. In the North, you have this industrial economy, and people there saw slavery as a great moral evil. But in the South, which was all farming, slavery was seen as absolutely essential to their entire economy, their whole way of life. These two Americas, they just couldn't exist together.
And then came the breaking point, 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln. He was committed to stopping slavery from spreading any further, and for the South, that was the final straw. Southern states started leaving the Union, one by one. And that's what lit the fuse on the American Civil War, the absolute bloodiest war in the country's history.
So after the unbelievable trauma of the Civil War, you have a country that's back together, and it's industrializing like crazy, and now it starts to look beyond its own borders. The nation was about to make its grand entrance onto the world stage, and I mean in a big way.
The big turning point? That was the Spanish-American War in 1898. It was a short war, but super decisive. The U.S. pretty much dismantled the last bits of the old Spanish Empire, and suddenly it's got control over places like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Just like that, America went from being a former colony to a colonial power itself.
And if you want a perfect example of America's new, muscular foreign policy, look no further than the Panama Canal. Here's how it went down. The U.S. tries to make a deal with Colombia to build the canal. Colombia says no. So, does President Teddy Roosevelt just pack up and go home? Nope. The U.S. supports a revolution for Panama to become independent, instantly recognizes the new country, and, what do you know, cuts a new deal for the canal. Wow.
And to make sure everyone got the message, Roosevelt built up the Great White Fleet. This wasn't just any navy. It was the second largest navy on the entire planet. He sent it sailing around the world as a clear, powerful signal to everyone else. America is here, we're a major player, and our power is now global.
So let's just pause here in 1914 and think about this. You've got this nation, one that was written off as useless lands, that has become an industrial giant with one of the most powerful navies in the world. And this all comes to a head just as the entire planet is about to explode into World War I. So the real question is, what happens next?